Hello, I'm Sandra and I'm currently researching and assisting Professor Sharda at the Archaeological Sciences Center in Indian Institute of Technology, Gandhinagar, India, on the project Worked upon Assemblages from Bronze Age site of Dholavira. At the outset, I would like to thank the conference organizers, Professor Bisht, the excavator of the site, the Archaeological Survey of India, and the ICHR, Indian Council of Historical Research, for funding. Before going to results, I answer an important question. Why Dholavira? Unfortunately, in India, though there have been attempts at descriptive worked upon analysis, only 3 papers are on experimental reproduction, that also from Neolithic, assemblages from Neolithic, Iron Age, and early historic sites, and none on useware analysis exist. So coming to Dholavira, Dholavira is a key urban Harappan civilization site in the western Indian state of Gujarat, dated between 3000 to 1450 BC. The site has unearthed a rich repertoire of antiquities from 7 well-defined chronostratigraphic cultural contexts, as we see here. It was also declared as a UNESCO World Heritage Site recently. The site's human occupation is divided into early, mature, and late phases. The excellent town planning divided into citadel or castle, bailey, middle, and lower towns. The site has yielded a sizable work of bone and ivory corpus, and therefore the project on the study of its typology, technology, and experimental reproduction is being conducted, and we present the first few results from the pilot investigation. These are some of the pottery and bead remains excavated from the site too. Literature review was done and a database of exemplar use of useware marks was created for reference. 19 artifacts in total, cleaned with water and cleaning solution, were examined under the Leica stereo microscope. The images were taken with LAS Easy software. So as you can see, we have both pointed and flat objects. So 3 artifacts among them show heavy encrustation, which obliterated the cervical marks. So documented useware marks were compared with the database to identify the types of marks. We encountered an ambiguity in nomenclature as all the pointed artifacts have been called bone points, chiefly used for hunting, and the flat ones as spatula by the excavators, leading to one question, whether form really equals function and therefore through causation equals correlation. Does each morpho-functional category thereby exhibit traces unique to it by virtue of their exclusive or dedicated usage? So here you can see that our sample set had slightly more flat artifacts, that is around 53% more than the pointed ones. And these are all assigned mostly to the mature Harappan deposits. 5 artifacts, the yellow bars in the graph, their provenance was known, but not their cultural context. Also, no flat artifacts were found from the middle town and no bone points from the stadium area. And there is a heavily encrusted cuboid-shaped remain, which was identified as a long bone, rough out, or blank in preparation. So there are generally 3 types of marks. So to sum it up, I'll say manufacturing marks to be first being manufacturing marks, which include the singular V-shaped profile cut marks with tapering ends, multiple adjoining scraping marks, and along the long axis of the bone, as you can see here, which can be due to the removal of skin, muscle, or periosteum. Useware marks such as polishing. So the second one, useware marks such as polishing or grinding leave a characteristic shine, as you can see in this picture. Post-depositional taphonemic marks such as oxide staining of manganese oxide and ferrous oxide, as you can see in these pictures, and then trampling due to the sediment movement or porosity, as you can see in this picture, due to chemical agents or long exposure to water. Flake scars are also being documented in pointed objects. Moreover, interestingly, 2 equidistant concentric circles were also found. The flat artifacts from Citadel, Bailey, and Lower Town had different type of marks. from stadium from stadium and the water reservoir area. From the given distribution, we found no patterning in terms of type of objects and the location at the site. Bone artifacts recovered from Dholavira were highly encrusted, and most of the objects were broken, and we could not have complete or intact pieces, which limited the further interpretation of the determining the mode of manufacture or type of bone used and original morphology. Similar use-by marks such as grinding, flake scars, cut marks, striations, polish were also observed in the Dholavira artifacts. The identification of the exact use of artifact cannot be determined by just looking at the use-by marks, and these need to be confirmed by further studies. And if points were used for hunting, why were they retrieved from the residential and market areas of the site? And there are plenty more questions and unanswered. We look forward to finding answers to these questions by conducting more further studies. Thank you.
My name is Hanna PAGEAU and I am a doctoral researcher at Cardiff University in Wales, which is where I am coming to you from today. My flash talk today is entitled Inhabiting Islands, Mammalian Response to Niche Island Biogeography. And since this is a flash talk, let's get right into it. Now, before I introduce you to my project and its aims, let's get you acquainted with Scotland's Western Isles, the Hebrides, which is where my work takes place. So, of course, when we talk about how mammals respond to an environment and how they adapt, we can't start to get into the details and plans until you understand the surroundings. My dissertation includes 8 sites across 4 of the islands of the Outer Hebrides. You can see these sites highlighted in that pretty rosy gold colour on the map to the left of the slide. They are Kneap on Lewis, Northton on Harris, Udall and Solus on North Uist, and on South Uist I'll be looking at Achrechmar, Barnish, Dunvollen and Kilfeder, though unfortunately Kilfeder won't be included in my size and shape analysis because COVID and logistics really do just like to get in the way. Anyways, occupation of the Outer Hebrides did begin in the Mesolithic and continues on into modern day. But my data and sites focus on the Neolithic to the middle near end of the Norse period. It's a little difficult to give you exact dates for that because I could do a whole presentation just on how confusing and messy the Hebrides, Scotland and the British Isles are when it comes to time periods. But that is roughly 4000 BCE into the early bits of the 14th century CE. It's a pretty wide time period for someone not working in the Paleolithic, but breadth is necessary for assessing adaptation. Now, my dissertation, similarly titled to this presentation, Inhabiting Islands, Stock and Sustainability in the Western Scottish Isles, has 4 main aims. Firstly, to look at the introduction of mammals to the Western Isles. Next, to assess the change in size and shape over time of the introduced mammals, both wild and domestic, of which all terrestrial mammals are human introduced. Alongside that size and shape analysis, I'll be looking for possible morphological adaptations to the very niche environment of the Hebrides. Lastly, I'm hoping to be able to explore what herd management might have looked like in the prehistoric and Norse period. This is my favorite part of the project because it includes my favorite animal, the red deer, Cervus elephas. And there's kind of a running theory that they might have been semi-managed because of how they had to have gotten to the islands, which is a direct comparison to some other species currently semi-managed, like the Sami reindeer. The 3 sites you see NISPs, which just mean number of identified specimens for here, are Bornish, Kilfeder, and Cladhallen. Well, Cladhallen is not included in my dissertation because unfortunately it's not quite done being analysed yet. But either way, these are the 3 primarily Cardiff-run sites on the Outer Hebrides, and it just gives you a quick little quantitative snapshot of what gave rise to this project and why it's possible, but also how I ended up in Wales when I'm studying Scotland. So as you can see from these NISPs, my domestic species are cows, pigs, and sheep, goats. I likely don't need to tell any of you, but overs are our group as sheep goat here because there's so little goat, but also because sheep goat can be incredibly difficult to distinguish from the archaeological record unless you have the money for zooms, and I am self-funded, so sheep goat it is. Now, my methods are a 3-prong approach. I will hopefully be using these to get at the aims of my project. Though, of course, there are other bits and bobs that may get added in the end, especially once I finish remeasuring and reanalyzing Bornesh. Most importantly, in my opinion, is geometric morphometrics, commonly called GMM. This is the use of landmarks to measure bones. I will be using GMM on the appendicular skeleton because skulls don't exactly survive the environmental conditions I'm working with unless they were ritualistically placed. The use of GMM then leads into my second set of methods, which is shape analysis. This part of my work will focus on the tarsal bones, most importantly the astragali, as the astragali is an incredibly useful bone that can tell you not only about morphological adaptations that would have helped for better locomotion on the rocky islands of the Western Isles, but it can also be used to estimate body size, as it can be used to identify wither's height. Sorry, I have a bit of a speech impediment, which is the height of an ungulate from hoof to shoulder, and some other animals as well. Lastly, of course, there will be plenty of comparative statistics in my work, including comparisons to collections on Orkney, mainland Scotland, courtesy of the newly doctored Alex Fitzpatrick, and at least Ireland as well. The latter is particularly important for my portion of my work on red deer. Oh no, the picture broke. Oh well, that's fine. That work on red deer is probably the most important part of the work for me and for wider audiences, as looking at how red deer have survived on the Hebrides can inform all sorts of questions we may have about adaptation to climate change, something of dire importance to include in our work as we move forward into an unknown future. I will be using modern red deer populations from across Scotland and Ireland to not only look into my curiosities about herd management, but also to understand what adaptations and strategies may have helped the red deer survive on the Outer Hebrides when they haven't on the other Scottish Isles, to hopefully help inform any future rewilding efforts which do come up every now and then on Orkney and Shetland, the northern Scottish Isles. But since this is a flash talk, that's the quick snapshot you get of my doctoral work today. Of course, I am happy to answer any questions. Apparently all of the photos in this decided to break, because there's a very funny photo on this slide, or there should be, of me digging on a cliff in Wales, completely almost falling over from wind. But I think that one is what was used on Twitter. So anyway, I'll stop waffling on, but thank you. This is just a bit about me. And I'm sorry that my pictures apparently broke in the last 15 minutes since I opened this PowerPoint.
In my PhD project. So, as we all know, human communities have obtained most of their food, medicine, fuel, raw materials, and among others, from plant resources, but due to preservation biases, they are often not found in our archaeological sites, and thus diminishing the role that plant resources surely had throughout the past. And Archaeobotany, with the use of different techniques and remains, studies plant-human interaction and is also used in bioenvironmental reconstruction. One of the bigger interests for archaeobotanists is the study of domestication and the changes in subsistence strategies. And here, in my PhD, I want to provide new information about the practices implemented in obtaining plant resources and in processing of crops and gathered species, while also informing us about the exploitation of the soil and the ecosystems that surrounded the early farmers and herders during the recent prehistory in the interior of the Iberian Peninsula. So, usually the study of the exploitation of plant resources has been approached with analysis of carpological remains, that's seeds-on-fruit remains, but here we propose an approach that combines both the study of micro and macroarchaeobotanical evidences to accommodate possible taphonomical biases. And thus we'll be studying carpological remains, but also micro remains such as phytoliths and starch granules. And this will be contrasted through an experimental protocol and a reference collection. Also, we are using geometric morphometrics in order to more accurately distinguish between taxa in the case of micro remains. So, for the past 3 decades, the study of plant resources exploitation of the early farmers in the Iberian Peninsula has been approached via the study of macro remains. However, these investigations, although increasingly frequent, have been focused on the analysis of sequence coming from the Mediterranean coast, southeast of the peninsula, and to a lesser extent, the Atlantic coast and Portugal. Nonetheless, these studies have let us understand the overall trend in crop choices on a regional basis. And the site of Mirador, here in red, was chosen given its location in a biogeographic crossroad between the Iberian Range and the Cantabrian Cornice, and also because it comes from a region underrepresented on the literature. On this site, previous studies have been undergone, first by Ana Rodriguez in the early 2000s, as well as my own work for my master thesis. and this has shown how the crop assemblage from El Mirador differs from the trends seen in neighboring sites, as well as the trends seen in other areas. In fact, these results are more closely related to those found in Central Europe and the LBQ culture. To better understand if this diversity in crop choices were related maybe to socioeconomic practices or are due to environmental constraints, in my PhD, I'm focusing in the characterization of byproducts of agricultural activities as well as the accompanying weeds. So both macro and microbotanical remains are both useful to pinpoint each step of some agricultural activities, but the analysis of plant microremains of particular interest when it comes to understanding the processing of these plants, as they remain attached to the surface of artifacts, but also in dental calculus. Phytoliths, due to their mineral nature, are a relevant source about the diverse anatomical and taxonomical representation of the original plant contribution, as they are preserved in most conditions. And starches, on the other hand, provides information about not only the presence of cereals, but other seeds, fruits, and roots, and sugars. And the modification of the surface of the starches give us information of the different preparation and consumption techniques. So the samples studied in my PhD come from El Mirador, located in the Sierra de Tapuerca, that is geographically framed in the northern territory of the Meseta, and has a chronology that encompasses from the first Neolithic occultation of the region until the Bronze Age. This site has mostly been used as a sheepfold cave and a collective burial site, and given the nature of the fulminate deposits, the preservation of archaeobotanical macro remains through carbonization is excellent. So we are not only studying macro remains, but also taking sediment bulk samples, both for flotation and both for phytolith analysis, and also studying recovering residue from dental calculus, grindstone, and pottery. So this work is already undergoing, but for now I have mostly focused on the study of the macro remains, and of now we already know some of the main plant taxa that we have found throughout all different periods. I have just started searching on the ethnobotany information of these species, so to know about the habitat, seasonality, and also the possible uses documented for the species that have been identified. Just this past month, I started with the phytolith analysis, and in the coming weeks, I will be starting with the starch analysis. So hopefully, next year, I will be able to show you some results about the agriculture, herding, and plant resource management of the early farmers in the interior of the Iberian Peninsula. So thank you for your attention. I will be here if you have some questions.